Hello and welcome back to another KCC video. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some ProRevenge. Our first story today comes to us from Electric Clear. Do the job you were hired for or have it ripped out from under you. Let's jump right in. Most people, including myself, have lived in an apartment at least one time or another over the course of their lives, and can attest to the nuances and annoyances that come from a poorly designed building. Thin walls, loud neighbors, circuit breakers tripping, poor air conditioning, lackluster lighting, abysmal parking, etc. I have personally experienced all of these, and in my college years, I was also part of the problem. Loud parties, loud music, etc. We upset many of our neighbors. So after getting the partying out of my system, putting my nose to the books, and graduating with a degree in electrical engineering, I found myself several years later working with a developer of a multi-family housing. Hoping to right some wrongs from the past, I pledged to make the experience for the people who would be living in the community a bit better than my own. I couldn't control the building materials or aesthetics of the complex, but I did have control of the design of the electrical system, from the utility transformer to the outlet you plug your hairdryer into. I therefore set out to design a robust system with more circuits per apartment, better lighting, better materials, and better access than what was typical for the building construction at the time. My first step was to tackle the exterior lighting for the complex. Instead of using metal halides, those large shoebox lights that buzz at night, I persuaded the developer to install LED pole and building mounted lights. These were designed to increase the light output of the parking area and walkways for safety, while maintaining cutoff so it wouldn't intrude into someone's bedroom window. They looked good, saved energy, and had a higher color rendering index 80 than the standard metal halides 70. It took a while to get the calculations correct, but in the end, I was happy with it. Moving on to the apartment units, my design philosophy was such that no one, at any time, should be overloading any circuit within the apartment under normal use. No light should dim when appliances, vacuums for example, were plugged in. Every room had access to plugs on every wall. Every room should have a light, and every light should be controlled by a switch, and every switch should be within an arm's length of any entry point into the room. I spent several weeks refining the project template, and after some back and forth with our client, the developer, some items were cut, but the majority remained as per the design intention, which was spelled out to the T. I was happy, they were happy, and after the drawings made their way through permitting, the developer hired the contractors, and the project was underway. Everything was going great until the general contractor hired the electrical subcontractor. For the purpose of this story, we shall call this electrical contractor Eddie, not his real name. As a contractor, you sign a contract stating that you'll build what is shown on the drawings for a certain price. If the client accepts your offer, you win the contract. In doing so, you're obligated to provide what was shown on the drawings unless an addendum, revision, or substitute modifies the original contract, all of which must be approved by the engineer. It all started when I started receiving his submittals. For those not in the industry, this is a standard practice between the contractor and engineer, where the contractor will submit the materials he intends to use on the project to the engineer for approval. It is typical to see deviations from the design here and there, as contractors will typically source the most billing materials from a select number of vendors, a single vendor being ideal. The vendors will provide alternates to the design, and it's up to the engineer to determine if these substitutes are acceptable or not. The first submittal was for the exterior lighting, which was complete garbage. Eddie submitted metal halide lighting, which was not only the wrong type of light, but the wrong distribution, which would cause backlighting into the residents' windows at night, the wrong color temperature, and the wrong output too dim. I rejected the submittal outright and told him to provide the light fixtures shown on the plan, which specifically indicated that no substitutions were allowed due to the calculations that were involved in the design, photometrics. I gave him a call to explain this fact and told him to resubmit per the plans. Eddie wasn't happy. Not happy at all. However, Eddie does submit another fixture which was slightly better, but still not on par with the design. Again, I reject the submittal and state that unless he can prove that the fixture he submitted is similar to or superior than the photometrics shown on the drawings, it will not be accepted. It is not the engineer's responsibility to proof a substitute, and if he wants to use this picture, he'll need to submit his own photometric calculations as well to prove the point. So Eddie does this. The calculations look good, really good. So good that I get suspicious and run his light fixture in my own model, and nothing matches at all. It's not even close, which means he forged information on a contractual document, and now I had leverage for what happens next. The client calls and asks what is holding up the project. I call my boss and explain the situation. He agrees and backs my case to the client, which leaves Eddie with no choice but to provide the fixtures he agreed to when he signed the contract. This back and forth continues with several other submittals, which become shorter and show less information. I call Eddie to tell him he's missing items, and he responds with excuses, and after some time, ends up not returning calls or emails. Time passes and I move on to other projects. Then I get a call from our client that some of the buildings are ready for a walkthrough and he would like me to do a site visit to check the work before drywall is installed. We set a date and I'm off to check it out. I arrive and see the site lighting that started our feud. It's correct and looks good, and I feel optimistic, hoping he learned his lesson. That was until I entered the first of the apartment units. The first thing I notice is the wiring is white. This is typical for smaller gauge Romex wire number 14, and our drawings show number 12 wire 12-2 Romex, typically yellow, which was our office standard. I take a closer look and confirm this is the case. Now, usually I don't take issue with this if it's brought to our attention ahead of time, and if it's used for lighting circuits only. 14-2 Romex is perfectly acceptable to use regardless. It's industry standard and code compliant. It just doesn't match our drawings and would require an unnecessary revision on our part to match what Eddie had his guys install to save himself from money without first discussing with us, me and my client. Then I looked around the circuiting, and I'm dumbfounded. Except for a few dedicated circuits, the drawings weren't followed at all. Lights and power circuits were combined, as were the rooms. As it stood, it would have been just another crappy apartment with the same problems I had spent so much time working to rectify in the first place. Again, we could have discussed this ahead of time, bounced ideas off each other and worked it out. I worked as an electrician to pay for college for years, so I know the nuances of wiring methods well and enjoy troubleshooting problems with electricians. Except this was Eddie, and Eddie effed up. Instead of working through the problem, he went off the radar and went rogue. Eddie was about to pay for his transgressions. ProRevenge. I wrote my report along with my pictures and copies of the plans. It looked like a murder scene with red lines, strike-throughs, captions, and comments, which illustrated clearly and definitively the stark differences between what was designed and the dumpster fire that was installed. It was sent to our client and my best buddy Eddie, which is standard. The client was pissed. We got on a call, and Eddie got chewed out for his poor communication and decision to abandon the plans and do his own thing. However, Eddie did have something on his side, which was the electrical code. Even though the plans were completely ignored, he was still in compliance, and he made that point clear. Except I had an ace up my sleeve. When I sent out the report, I didn't just send it to Eddie and the client, I also sent it to the AHJ, authority having jurisdiction, which in this case was the building official for the county. We'll call him Mark for the purpose of this story. Again, not his real name. Mark and I had gotten to know each other well over the course of the project. We discussed theory, code, restrictions, etc. to make sure that he knew what I was doing before the drawings were sent out for review. During our talks, he made it abundantly clear that whatever the drawings stated, as long as there weren't conflicts between the drawings and the code requirements, was exactly how the project should be built, period. Looping back to the phone call between myself, the client, and Eddie, I suggested we add another person to the call, who was the project superintendent. We'll call him Steve. Steve and I had previously discussed Eddie's failure to follow the drawings while I was on site, and I had pointed out to him that Mark had said any deviations from the plans would mean that the project wouldn't pass inspection unless the drawings stated otherwise. I asked Steve about this on the call, and he acknowledged the discussion and agreed with what had been said. Eddie at this point was fuming and said he had spoken to Mark as well and that this was not true. "Really?" I said. "Is that a fact? Well, let's get him on the phone as well then, shall we?" So we called Mark, and thank everything that is holy he answered. I filled him in on the discussion, my conversation with Steve, and he confirmed everything right there in front of the client, Eddie and Steve. The drawings must be followed, and deviations would not be allowed, or he would shut down the project. I was stoked. Finally, no one could hide, and everything was out in the open. Now, apparently that's where the story ended, but then they added on an edit which kinda ties things up. It says, apparently, old boy Eddie was hurting pretty bad now and was trying to recoup the money he knew he would be losing from the project. He started by submitting that all wiring allowed be dictated by the NEC. F no, rejected. Then he submitted the missing AFCI breakers he was supposed to install, but didn't, which weren't the combination style, rejected. This went on and on. I was called back out to the site again. Eddie had started to follow the plans, but was still using 14.2 for power circuits, where the plans called out for 12.2, which meant that the breakers he was installing in the panel boards were also wrong. He was installing the new site lighting with UF cable instead of conduits, which were called out in the plans. He wired the lights in the bathroom to the load side of the GFCI, which would cause the lights to cut out if the GFCI tripped. Note that the light shouldn't have even been on the same circuit as the GFCI, and he had tied all bathroom GFCIs together. Code yes, plans no. I mean, effing stupid crap to save a buck when he was already in deep. After my second report and response back to the client, Eddie got destroyed. He was to be liable for all the costs associated with his choices because the plan stated something to the effect of, any changes resulting from failure to execute the project, according to these drawings, will result in removal and reinstallation of equipment, conduits, wiring, and devices at no cost to the owner. I made sure to quote that directly in my report and let the client know personally, just in case it was overlooked. Therefore, not only did Eddie have to rip out all of his work in the apartment units, which at this time was 3 buildings at plus or minus 30 units per building, he couldn't even use the wire he had purchased because it wasn't the right gauge. Eventually, Eddie had had enough and agreed to do everything per the plans. He had decided in a final letter to beg me and my client to use the 14.2 Romex for the lighting, as I had said I would have allowed it earlier. The client and I spoke, and we agreed to let him use it for lighting circuits only, and I updated my drawings accordingly. And that's how I made Eddie, through the decision by our client and the power wielded by the AHJ, aka Mark, tear out all the work he did over 2 months on 3 apartment buildings and start over from scratch. To his credit, he did finish the project to completion. Afterwards, he was blacklisted from working on another project again with our client, and I never heard from him again. Moral of the story is, do the work you signed up for, and if you have questions, it never hurts to ask. So, not completely related, but this story reminded me of a house that we used to live in. We were on the bottom floor, there were people on the top floor, and one day we blew a fuse. But when that fuse blew, the vacuum upstairs shut off. And I'm going, that shouldn't be happening. We pay for our own electricity. So I go back in, I put a new fuse in, I screw the thing in, and the vacuum upstairs turns back on. I unscrew the fuse and the vacuum upstairs turns back off. Turns out they were stealing power. And not only did they run their vacuum off of that, but they ran their air conditioner, their computer, and a couple of other things as well that we were paying for. Buttholes. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our second story today comes to us from Fuzzy106. Steal my goose, I'll steal your reputation. Let's jump right in. I, 32 male, moved into a new house last year, and my wife and I have been decorating slowly. My wife, 30 female, being the eclectic, lovable goofball she is, found a small stone goose at Home Goods and has had fun giving it silly bandanas to mark various holidays. Well, for the last 2 weeks in June, she put a pride flag bandana on the goose. A couple days go by, and we noticed the bandana was missing. I assumed it was because of the heavy thunderstorm we had gotten. Neither my wife nor I are great at knot tying, and wrote it off. I was prepared to just get a new one. Soon after it went missing, I hopped on Nextdoor for unrelated reasons. I was scrolling through until I found that there was a rather passive-aggressive post about how many Pride Month decorations there were in the area now and how ungodly it all is. It's corrupting kids, yada yada yada, usual religious homophobia crap. I thought for a second and realized we hadn't seen anyone in this neighborhood with any sort of pride decorations besides me and my wife. So I had a thought. I opened up my front door camera and sure enough, someone walked onto my lawn, into my garden, and walked away with the bandana. Unfortunately, the angle wasn't great, so I couldn't catch a face. This time, I went on Amazon and bought a cheapy baby-sized t-shirt with a pride flag on it, put it on my goose, and moved the goose to my porch instead, in full view of the camera. Not 48 hours later, I get a notification that someone was on my porch and they stole my darn goose. Stealing the $5 bandana and a $5 shirt was one thing, but you stole my wife's goose. She loved that thing. Now it was on. Before, I was just going to keep screwing with this person, making bigger and bigger shows and making it harder to steal the symbols until the HOA would ask me to tone it down. But nah, she hurt my wife. Now I would hurt her. I checked the cameras and bam, full face shot. I had seen this woman walking in our neighborhood before, so I thought for sure she lived, if not on my block, then near it. So I took to Facebook, specifically our residential complex's Facebook group. I went through the list of members and found her, the dreaded thief Karen in all her Christian iconographic glory. So I sent her a message with a copy of the video with the message, "Hello Karen, I'm not sure why you felt it was appropriate to step onto my property on 2 separate occasions and steal items from my home. But I suspect it's because you have something against the LGBT community based on a certain Nextdoor post and your overall Facebook vibe. You do not need to respond to this message at all, but I will not mince words. Here's my ultimatum. Return my bandana, my goose, and the shirt clean and unharmed within the next 24 hours, or this video is going all over the neighborhood group and to the police. I'm sure you neither want the shame nor the penalties that go along with trespassing onto a neighbor's yard and stealing. Return the items to my porch and this ends now. Refuse, and I will not stop finding ways to make your life in this neighborhood miserable. I also suggest you read that book you claim to love. Pretty sure not stealing is rule number 8 out of the top 10. Signed, OP." I checked my messenger a couple hours later to see that she read it but didn't reply. I sent one more message. "I see you read my message. The clock started at time of red stamp. Tick-tock." No reply. Next day, I get up, go to work, and come home about 2-ish hours before the deadline. Still no goose. 1 hour to go, check the porch, still no goose. I message Karen once more. 23 hours have passed. 1 hour remains. Final warning, give me back my stuff or it is war. 30 minutes later, I get a notification from my doorbell. Karen brought back my goose with its t-shirt. It smelled like it had been in the trash. Ping, a message from Karen. "I've given you back your stupid goose and its shirt. Now leave me alone." Where is the bandana, Karen? And I explicitly told you to bring them back clean, and this has clearly been in some kind of garbage. I threw the bandana away. It's gone. Then I am left with no choice. Close chat window, open neighborhood group, post videos and tag her, along with the text confession. At least 40 plus replies in a 70 plus house neighborhood. Police report filed with the local department next day. No idea what went down there, but I did get contacted by the DA's office a week ago with a request for a statement, and any additional evidence I had, I sent the police the videos, but I tossed in the text convo to the DA. Now I'm waiting to see what happens next. I don't want her to go to jail, as that seems disproportionate, but I hope she gets hit for a fine and maybe community service. Nobody hurts my wife, Karen. Nobody. Is one of those stories where you want there to be an update right away, but there isn't one yet. So down in the comments, there was some really good advice for OP. It says, take the t-shirt and the goose to your local dry cleaners and have them professionally cleaned. Then order another bandana as a single item, express delivery. Pay the $10 filing fee for small claims, and in your claim, put the cost of the cleaning, the cost of a day off work, the cost of a new bandana, and the cost of a filing and sheriff fees as the sum required to make you whole again. File a week after the DA indicates to you the outcome of the prosecution. Then get her served, because it's 90% likely she will be a no-show, and you will get a summary judgment on her as well to execute. I'll keep an eye on this story for updates, and I'll let you all know if I find anything. Check out both OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.